From Queen's Park to Parliament Hill, the minority Liberal government has survived its first major test, with the throne speech being adopted in the House of Commons. And let's get right into things with our Glenn McGregor in Ottawa. So Glenn, the throne speech may have been adopted, but there were some amendments put on the table by the opposition. What can you tell us?
Yeah, because the Liberals have only a minority in the House of Commons, they needed support of some other MPs. And earlier in the day yesterday, Don Davies, the NDP House leader, or interim leader rather, in the House of Commons, said that they were not going to support it. And that means that Conservatives, in order for the throne speech to pass, there had to be support from either the Bloc Québécois or the Conservatives, not all of them, just some of them, enough to get them over the 172 seat hump. But the vote was ultimately avoided because the Conservatives, just as the vote was being called, agreed to pass it on what is called on division. So what that means is that they essentially acquiesced to the bill passing without having a recorded vote where MPs all individually stand up and kind of a roll call vote. That saves the Conservatives from having to these images of them voting in favor, essentially, of Mark Carney's agenda for this session in Parliament, without the risk of toppling the government and sending us into another election, which I don't think too many people would be all that enthusiastic about if the Conservatives had decided to stick to their guns here, vote no against this. They had also previously passed an amendment to that bill that urged the Carney government to produce an economic statement. Now, Carney has said he is not coming out with a spring budget this year. You're going to have to wait till the fall economic statement. And the Conservatives say, well, listen, Canadians don't know what the state of their federal government finances are right now because they have not released this. They don't see any spending plan. However, they have decided to avoid this. But the curious thing here, interesting thing here, is that the NDP very publicly deciding not to support the bill. Let's listen to what Don Davies said when he was on breakfast television this morning.
Well, I guess the message is that if the government wants New Democrat support, they're going to have to bring in policies that help working families across this country. And, we carefully examined the throne speech. We had a full caucus discussion. And frankly, there just wasn't enough in there that addresses the real priorities that are facing working Canadians. So we couldn't support it.
Now, although the throne speech is a confidence measure and a government could collapse on this, that doesn't generally happen. I don't think it's ever happened that a Canadian government has fallen on a confidence vote on a throne speech. But there will be other votes in short order in the near future. Mark Carney promising to move very quickly on his economic agenda, his plan for these nation-building projects, and that's going to require ultimately some support in the House of Commons, likely before the end of the month. There are going to be other confidence votes on money issues. Any bill in which spends money or raises money through taxes is automatically a confidence vote. So we're going to see how this plays out, Faiza, in coming weeks before the summer recess, as whether or not the NDP continues to break with the Liberals on this, or whether they will lend some or all of their 7 votes in the House of Commons in order for the Liberals to pass legislation.
And Glenn, this as Liberals are facing pressure from across the aisle to hammer out a trade deal with the U.S. Can you tell us what the latest is on those negotiations?
Yeah, those talks apparently still ongoing. We know Dominic LeBlanc, the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, who is kind of the front man for Canada dealing with the White House, and especially with the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He was in Washington on Monday evening, I believe, came back on Tuesday. Tuesday evening, coming back Wednesday. LeBlanc is still, I think, engaged in this. Other cabinet ministers, also Melanie Joly, also dealing with counterparts in the U.S., as is François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister. But the government is getting a lot of pressure from industry, steel and aluminum industry in particular, to retaliate against the increase this week by Donald Trump of the tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. Mark Carney, yesterday, we heard him when we were talking about this with you yesterday, Faiza, about how he says that they are engaged in intensive discussions right now, a larger discussion about ending the tariffs by the U.S. on Canada. So I think the thinking here from the Carney government is, yes, this is frustrating and worrying, deeply worrying for people in the steel industry, both on the businesses as well as the employees and particularly people who depend on steel products as well, who buy the steel. This is causing a lot of concern, but Carney, I think, wants to see if he can get a bigger, larger deal to get all the tariffs either reduced or removed, but he will only have a limited amount of time to do that, and negotiating with Donald Trump is a difficult process. He changes his mind a lot. Today in Ottawa, here on Parliament Hill, you have representatives from both the steel industry businesses as well as labor unions meeting with politicians and MPs, trying to convince them to act quickly and retaliate against the U.S. to impose the same tariffs, because the steel industry's position is, look, we could deal with 25% tariffs. It was bad for us. It was really hurting us, but we were still viable. At 50%, the U.S. market is effectively closed to Canadian steel and aluminum, and those companies have to find other export markets. Not a good situation for them. This continues much longer. There will almost certainly be temporary or possibly permanent job losses in those industries. Bad news for them, bad news also for Mark Carney's government, because this is what he ran on, is bringing this situation, this trade war with the U.S. to an end.
All right, we'll continue to follow those impacts. Our Glenn McGregor, as always, in Ottawa. Thank you so much.